Matthew's voice echoed throughout our living room, causing our friends to chuckle as he said, "You really need to see the face you make when you're trying to tell a story, honey," Tasha recalled. He continued, "She can never get to the point. She just talks on and on. It's like watching someone trying to parallel park while blindfolded," as familiar laughter filled the room. Tasha's face felt hot with embarrassment. She held her wine glass tightly, maintaining the same forced smile she'd been using for the past 5 years of her marriage. But something inside her snapped. Tasha Reynolds, 32 years old, was fed up with being the punchline of every one of her husband's jokes. Despite her success as a marketing executive at a top Houston firm, where she managed a team and million-dollar campaigns, at home she was just Matthew's favorite victim, the target of his endless jokes about everything from her cooking to her looks. This particular night was supposed to be a relaxed dinner with friends, but just like every other social event, it had become all about Matthew. He was in top form, entertaining their guests with one story after another, each one designed to make Tasha look foolish. When she tried to share news about her recent promotion, he interrupted, making a joke about her sleeping through the announcement. Because she could sleep through an earthquake, the friends laughed, and all eyes were on her. He then put his arm around her in a possessive way and continued, "Seriously, though, you should see her try to give presentations at work. Remember that time you called me crying because you forgot the client's name?" The story was completely false, but Matthew had a knack for creating believable lies by weaving in small truths, making her doubt her own memories. Whenever she tried to defend herself, he would just give a condescending smile and say, "Relax, it's just a joke." As Tasha watched him commanding the room, so sure of his control over her and their friends, she realized she had reached her breaking point. She felt a dangerous clarity come over her. The biggest secret he had begged her to keep was on the tip of her tongue. Maybe it was time for everyone to hear a truly funny story. At first, Tasha didn't mind Matthew's jokes. They had met at a company party where he seemed charming and successful. When he teased her about spilling her drink, it felt like playful flirting, not mockery. "You're adorable when you're flustered," he had said while helping her clean up, and she mistook his teasing for affection. The changes were gradual. He would make a few jokes about her poor sense of direction or her inability to dress herself, but then he would follow up with expensive gifts and romantic gestures as if to make up for his hurtful words. Tasha, who had always been confident in her abilities, began to second-guess herself. Her boss, Alex, used to praise her presentation skills and sharp mind. But now she heard Matthew's voice in her head during meetings. Even their wedding was a red flag. During his speech, Matthew made the entire room laugh with stories about her clumsiness and forgetfulness. While her father looked uncomfortable, everyone else seemed to find it hilarious. She convinced herself that this was just his way of showing his love. About 2 years ago, their sex life began to suffer. At first, Matthew blamed work stress, then he blamed her for being needy. But when they saw a doctor and he was diagnosed with impotence, everything changed. His jokes became crueler and more frequent. He seemed to need to tear her down in order to build himself up. "Don't tell anyone," he begged after the diagnosis. "This stays between us," Tasha agreed, wanting to protect him even as he publicly humiliated her more and more. She kept his secret, believing that's what a good wife does. Last week, she overheard him on the phone with his friend Brad, making up stories about her being frigid and difficult to please. Her anger boiled over as she listened to him twist their private issues into another joke at her expense. I've spent 5 years of my life making myself smaller to avoid becoming the subject of his next joke, she thought. 5 years of forcing laughs while dying inside. 5 years of keeping his secrets while he broadcast my every flaw, real or imagined, to the world. Looking at the people who had laughed at his jokes for years, she wondered if they would still find him so funny if they knew the truth. And here's the best part, Matthew said, his voice rising dramatically. Last week, Tasha actually tried to cook a romantic dinner. You should have seen it burnt to a crisp, smoke everywhere. She can't even boil water without having a crisis. The laughter felt like needles in Tasha's skin. In reality, she had spent hours preparing that dinner, trying to create an opportunity for them to talk about their problems. The smoke had only happened because she was distracted by a call from Matthew, who was running late again. Brad's wife, Jennifer, leaned forward and said, "At least she tries, Matt. When was the last time you cooked anything?" Tasha felt a surge of gratitude, but Matthew quickly crushed it. "I make sure she's satisfied in other ways," he smirked, giving Tasha a knowing look. "Right, honey?" The room filled with suggestive laughter. Tasha felt her face burn as Matthew enjoyed the attention. He was deliberately using a lie to distract from his own inadequacies. "Actually," she began, but Matthew cut her off. "Careful now, sweetheart. We don't want you embarrassing yourself again." His tone was light, but his eyes held a warning. "Remember last month at the Stevens party when you tried to tell that story about your client meeting? That wasn't..." Tasha started again. "See what I mean?" Matthew interrupted, turning back to their friends. "She gets so confused sometimes. Good thing she has me to keep her straight." Brad and the others chuckled, but Tasha saw Jennifer watching her with concern. The room felt stifling, the weight of years of humiliation pressing down on her. Then Matthew delivered the final blow. "You know what's funny?" he said, feeding off the attention. "Tasha actually suggested we start trying for kids soon. Can you imagine? She can barely take care of herself." The room went silent. Everyone knew they had been married for 5 years with no children. Uncomfortable glances were exchanged. "I mean, let's be honest," Matthew continued, oblivious to the tension. "Some people just aren't cut out to be parents, right, honey?" At that moment, Tasha's resolve solidified. For years, she had kept his secret out of a misplaced sense of loyalty and duty. She had endured the mockery and constant attacks on her confidence, smiling through the humiliation while he built himself up by tearing her down. But misusing their private struggles to humiliate her while portraying himself as the superior partner was too much. She carefully set her wine glass down, her hands steady for the first time all evening. The truth about their childless marriage was about to become the night's entertainment. "Matthew," she said, her voice surprisingly calm, "maybe you should tell them about your doctor's appointment last year." The smirk on his face vanished. "Honey, you're drunk. Maybe you should get some water." "I'm not drunk," she replied. "Actually, I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years." She turned to their friends. "Would you like to hear a funny story for once?" Matthew stood up abruptly. "Who needs a refill?" Brad Jennifer, his voice edged with panic. Sit down, Matthew, Tasha said quietly. You love story time. Remember? The room grew tense as their friends sensed the shift in the mood. Matthew's face darkened as he realized his usual tactics weren't working. Tasha's had too much wine, he announced, trying to regain control. She gets emotional when she drinks. Remember that time at the Christmas party when what? Tasha interrupted. When I caught you making up stories about our sex life to your friends, or when I overheard you blaming me for our lack of children. Jennifer sat down, her wine glass in hand. Matt, maybe you should let her speak. Oh, there's nothing to say, Matthew laughed, but it sounded forced. Tasha is just being dramatic. You know how women get sometimes? Do I get dramatic when you mock my cooking, my job, my appearance? Tasha's voice grew stronger. Or am I being dramatic about the real reason we don't have children? The color drained from Matthew's face. He moved toward her, reaching for her arm. Honey, let's talk about this in private. For a moment, Tasha almost gave in. The familiar urge to protect him, to keep his secret, rose inside her. He must have seen her hesitation because his expression soft. Sorry if I went too far with the jokes, he said gently. You know I love you. Let's just enjoy the rest of the evening. Brad nodded encouragingly. Come on, Tasha, Matt's just playing around. He doesn't mean anything by it. She almost believed it, almost fell back into the pattern of smiling and pretending. Matthew's hand was on her shoulder now, a gentle squeeze that was also a warning. Remember what we talked about, he whispered just loud enough for her to hear. Some things should stay private. That's when Tasha saw it clearly. The manipulation disguised as concern, the threat hidden beneath the affection. For years, he had used her silence as permission to humiliate her. Her discretion had become his weapon. You're right, Matthew, she said, standing up. Some things should stay private, like your jokes about our sex life, especially since she paused, meeting his eyes. When was the last time we actually had one? Tasha, he growled. Don't? What's wrong? I thought you loved jokes, she said, turning to their friends. Want to hear something really funny? For 2 years, my husband has been... Matthew lunged forward, knocking over his wine glass. This isn't funny anymore. No, Tasha agreed, stepping back. It never was, since we're all sharing funny stories. Jennifer suddenly spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. Maybe we should talk about what you told Brad last week, Matt. Matthew's head snapped toward her. What about how Tasha's frigid? How she's the reason you can't. Jennifer's voice trailed off meaningfully. The room went completely silent. Tasha stared at Jennifer, then at Brad, who was now staring at his shoes. You've been telling people it's my fault. Her voice was barely a whisper. Honey, they're misunderstanding, Matthew stammered. I was just venting to Brad. Guy talk, guy talk. Jennifer's voice. Loads. You've been telling everyone at the club that your wife is defective, that she's the reason you can't perform, that she's... Shut up! Matthew shouted, making everyone jump. You don't know what you're talking about. But Jennifer wasn't finished. I heard you at Susan's party too, making jokes about how Tasha probably couldn't satisfy any man. How she's lucky to have you because no one else would want such a... That's enough. Matthew's face was purple with rage. Tasha's hands were shaking, but not from fear. All this time, she had kept his secret out of loyalty while he had been spreading lies about her, making her the joke not just in their home but everywhere. Actually, she said, her voice cutting through the tension, it's not enough. Not nearly enough. She turned to face their friends. Want to know why we really don't have children? Why Matthew makes jokes about our sex life but never actually talks about it? Why he's so desperate to make me look inadequate? Tasha, please, Matthew begged, his arrogance finally cracking. Think about what you're doing. I have thought about it, she replied. For 2 years I've thought about it. Every time you mocked me in public, every time you made me feel small, every time you blamed me for our problems. I thought about it. She looked around the room at the people who had laughed at his jokes for years. My husband has been impotent for the past 2 years. Complete erectile dysfunction. That's why we don't have children. That's why he invents stories about my inadequacies. That's why he needs to tear me down in front of everyone to hide his own issues. The silence was deafening. Matthew stood frozen, his face ashen. The doctor said it was likely psychological. Tasha continued, her voice steady. He suggested therapy, but Matthew refused. He said he didn't need help. Instead, he decided to cope by turning me into a punchline. You promised, Matthew whispered, his voice breaking. You promised you'd never tell, and you promised to love and respect me, she replied. I guess we're both disappointments. Brad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Jennifer was staring at Matthew with undisguised disgust. The others shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact. For the first time in their marriage, Matthew had no clever comeback, no cruel joke to deflect attention. He just stood there, exposed and humiliated, exactly how he had made her feel for years. The power dynamic had shifted completely. By revealing his secret, she had freed herself from its weight. Now, everyone would know the truth behind his cruel humor, the insecurity driving his need to humiliate her. You've ruined everything. Matthew's voice was low and dangerous. You think this is funny? You think humiliating me makes you better? No, Matthew, I don't think humiliation is funny at all, she replied. That's the difference between us. He turned to their friends, desperately trying to salvage his reputation. She's lying. She's trying to embarrass me because she's jealous of my success. You know how she gets? Stop, Matt. Brad's voice was firm. Just stop. We've all seen how you treat her. Oh, so now you're taking her side. Matthew laughed bitterly. After all the times you laughed at my jokes, after everything I told you about her. That's exactly why, Jennifer interjected. The things you've said about Tashuthi were cruel. We should have said something sooner. Matthew's face contorted with rage. You want cruel? Fine. He turned to Tasha, his mask completely gone. Tell them about the promotion you're so proud of. Tell them how you really got it. Tasha's heart stopped. This was the one area he had never joked about her career. Tell them about the late nights with your boss, he continued, his voice dripping with venom. Tell them why you really got picked over more qualified candidates. The room went silent. This was no longer a joke. This was a character assassination. Actually, a new voice spoke from the doorway. I can tell them about that promotion. Everyone turned to see Alex, Tasha's boss, standing there. Tasha had forgotten she was supposed to come over later to drop off some contracts. "I've been standing here for a while," Alex said, walking into the room. "Long enough to hear you try to destroy your wife's reputation to save your own." Matthew's face went pale. "This is a private matter." "Nothing's private with you, Matthew. Isn't that your thing? Making everything public?" Alex turned to the room. "Tasha got that promotion because she single-handedly landed the Peterson account. She stayed late working on the pitch." "Yes, with our entire team. I know because I was there every night." "Alex, you don't have to." Tasha started. "Yes, I do," she cut her off. "I've watched you shrink yourself for years because of him. Not anymore." She faced Matthew directly. "Your wife is brilliant at her job. She earned everything she has. The only person riding on someone else's coattails in this marriage is you." Matthew looked around the room, finding no remaining allies. His expression turned ugly. "You think this makes you strong?" He spat at her. "Turning my friends against me. Exposing private medical issues. You're pathetic." Tasha stood up, gathering her purse. "No, Matthew. What's pathetic is building yourself up by tearing others down. What's pathetic is blaming your wife for your inadequacies. What's pathetic is thinking that cruelty makes you powerful." She turned to their guests. "Thank you for coming. I think the party's over." As people began to gather their things, Matthew made one last attempt to regain control. "If you walk away now, don't bother coming back." Tasha paused at the stairs. "That's the first funny thing you've said all night, because trust me, Matthew, I won't." Word of what happened spread quickly through their social circle. Within a week, everyone knew about Matthew's behavior, not just his medical issues, but the years of cruelty he had inflicted on Tasha. His carefully crafted image as the charming jokester crumbled as people began sharing their own observations of his bullying at the country club, where he had loved holding court with his humor. People started avoiding his table. His jokes fell flat, met with uncomfortable silence instead of laughter. Even his closest friends, especially after Jennifer shared more stories about his vicious lies, kept their distance. The final blow came at his firm's annual dinner. Matthew tried to tell one of his funny stories about Tasha, forgetting she wasn't there to be his punching bag anymore. Someone in the crowd spoke up. "Is this going to be as accurate as your other stories, Matt?" The room erupted in snickers. Not at his joke, but at him. He stormed out, humiliated. Later, Tasha heard he had gotten drunk at a bar, ranting about how she had ruined his life by betraying his confidence. But Tasha knew that real confidence doesn't come from tearing others down. It took losing her marriage to find her own. As she packed her things and moved into her new apartment, she finally felt like she could breathe again. The last time she saw Matthew, he tried to make a joke about her moving boxers. Nobody laughed. It turned out cruelty wasn't so funny when everyone could see it for what it really was. 6 months later, Tasha's life was completely different in the best possible way. Her promotion led to even bigger opportunities at work, and without Matthew's constant undermining, she finally felt confident taking them on. Alex became not just her boss, but a close friend, someone who celebrated her successes instead of mocking them. Jennifer and Tasha stayed in touch as well. A month after their dinner party, Jennifer filed for divorce from Brad, telling Tasha that her stand had given her the courage to face her own unhappy marriage. They met for coffee regularly now, laughing about things that were genuinely funny. Divorce proceedings were simple. Matthew, so afraid of further humiliation, agreed to Tasha's terms without argument. His final attempt at a joke. At least now everyone knows why we never had kids fell flat when Tasha's lawyer simply stared him down. Last week, she ran into him at a restaurant. He was dining alone, trying to charm the waitress with his usual jokes. She wasn't laughing. As Tasha passed his table, he called out, "Still can't take a joke, Tasha." She stopped and turned. "Oh, I can take a joke, Matthew. I just finally realized you were one." As she walked away, she heard something she had never heard in their marriage. Silence from Matthew. No comeback, no mocking laughter, just quiet acceptance of his new reality. These days, when Tasha looks in the mirror, she sees someone who is no longer the punchline of someone else's cruel jokes. She sees someone who found her voice, her strength, and her smile again. Turns out the best revenge isn't just exposing a bully, it's reclaiming your own joy.